And I know when I texted you to come on this week, I was like, "Are we going to talk about this?" I was like, "We're gonna talk about this." So I do want to give credit my former employer, Woodward Sports. Give a shout out to my guy Spencer. He said that Cade Cunningham is the best Piston since Isiah Thomas. Eric, this is a lot to get into, lots to dissect, because I feel like we're going to have different opinions on this. But hearing this, what do you think of it? And is Spencer crazy?
Spencer's not crazy. He's not correct, but he's not crazy. Let me just start here. I don't like these discussions, and then when people frame it as, oh, it's so disrespectful. How could you make an argument like this? How could you disrespect Chauncey and Grant? And, bruh, if those guys heard the number 1 overall pick that had an undefeated high school team, carried a BS Oklahoma State team to the NCAA tournament, has played his behind off and got better every single year of his career, one of the best passers in basketball, one of the best scorers in basketball. If they heard that comparison, I don't think they would think it's disrespect. Let's just start there. I hate it's such and such and it's not close argument. Like, bro, knock it off. Like, it's a worthy discussion. I totally understand it. Now, do I think Cade is the most talented since Isiah? I don't. I think Grant Hill gets wildly underrated and undersold for what he's done in his career for obvious reasons due to the injury, but Grant was sensational. I think, to me, if we're going just off talent, it goes Isiah, Grant, and I think Cade is right underneath. I truly believe that. I think Grant was a great playmaker. He had a lot of the explosiveness that we're starting to see from Cade now, where he's just dunking on everybody. Grant had that in his bag for a while as well. Really good defender, just a well-rounded all-around player that Grant Hill was. So I would personally go Grant at the number 2, but a big debate and argument that I had was he's not even better than Chauncey. I think that's wrong. I don't agree with that. I do think Cade is more talented than Chauncey Billups. I think there's some areas, I think like Chauncey's a better shooter. And kind of outside of that, I think there's some areas you can maybe pick around. But for me, I think Cade is better. I don't think Cade would be a detriment to the team if he went to the 04 Pistons and had to take on a smaller, Gary Payton, who was older in the finals. I think he'd get along just fine. And I think he'd find his way to get the other guys involved without overshadowing them. Just because Chauncey had a ring, that does not make him more talented. People get lost in what team success means. Team success means everybody is good, not just one dude. So when Chauncey's playing with Rip Hamilton, who was great, Tayshaun, who was great, Sheed, who's one of the OG stretch fours in NBA, you have one of the best defenders in NBA history. You have a Hall of Fame coach in Larry Brown, one of the deepest benches in NBA history. And be clear, I'm 34 years old. Nobody remembers the 04 Pistons as well as I do. I'm well qualified to talk and make this stamp. So, again, I love Chauncey more than anybody. He was fantastic. He was one of the OGs of the pull-up 3 in transition. I remember my high school coach used to hate that. But I don't think Cade Cunningham isn't as talented. He's a bigger player. They kind of play a bit of a similar style. They both were bruisers in terms of posting up. They're really good mid-range shooters. They were good defenders. I think Cade gives more versatility as a defender. Cade's obviously a better rebounder, and Cade commands attention that Chauncey never had to. Chauncey never got double and triple teamed the way Cade does. And, I mean, that's okay. That's not his fault. It's just based on how the roster was constructed. But when you look at me, it's a chip is not enough to say somebody is more talented. That doesn't necessarily mean they're more talented. It means the team around them is probably a little bit better. Cade has already eclipsed all of Chauncey's numbers in his 4th season, and that's okay. I think it's close to compare the two, but if I had to make a choice, I think Cade Cunningham is more talented than Chauncey Billups.
This is where I think conversations like this can go either side of the fence.
Yes.
I grew up on the Grant Hill era. I'm 32. I started watching basketball when I was 4. My first moment of Grant Hill was dunking on Alonzo Mourning. Okay.
Classic.
Grant Hill was just special. I think if you were to rank the best Pistons since Isiah Thomas, if I had to put my list out, it's probably Isiah, Grant, Ben Wallace, Cade, and Chauncey. And the reason why I would have Ben there is because the Pistons really traded for Ben. Like he was kind of around the league a lot. You know, he went from Washington, then he went to Orlando. We kind of played with Monty Williams for a little bit, which is kind of funny. But when you talk about the best Piston since Isiah, like Grant got into the All-Star game as a rookie, and he set a record.
Yep.
Grant Hill won Rookie of the Year, co-Rookie of the Year with Jason Kidd, but he still won Rookie of the Year. Grant Hill had the Pistons in the playoffs a lot. Cade hasn't done that yet. But if you look at the numbers, they're pretty identical. He puts up Grant Hill type of stats on a night-to-night basis this season. I think Cade will be in these conversations, Eric, but it's going to have to be, for me, do it for another 3 to 4 years, make the playoffs, win a playoff game, win a playoff series, and then you could revisit this conversation because I think it's really premature and early. But I think as a prospect, I've said this multiple times on this show, I think Cade Cunningham is the best prospect since Grant Hill. And that's how high I view Cade Cunningham. Mm-hmm. I think Cade has the possibility to, eclipse Grant Hill as the second best Piston right under Isiah Thomas. But I think for right now, it's really, really early. And for Chauncey Billups, for what it's worth, I think the reason why he didn't get doubled is because you couldn't double that 014. Because you would pay for it if you wanted to double Chauncey. But Chauncey was in MVP conversations when he was here. Mm-hmm. He was in some Defensive Player of the Year conversations as well. I don't want to, kind of belittle him in any way, shape, or form. But I mean, when you have these debates and these conversations, they can get really tough. They can get really dicey. But that's just my list. I've always respected what Ben Wallace did without really scoring the basketball, just being a defensive menace, defensive anchor out there for him to go into work squad for several years, winning multiple Defensive Player of the Years. I mean, Grant Hill, people were calling him the next Michael Jordan.
Yep.
Like if he doesn't get injured, who really knows what happens? Maybe he has a couple of chips. I don't know if it would be with Detroit, but hey, you never really know. But I don't think Spencer is too crazy, but I think it's too early for us to say he's already better than Grant. I think he has the possibility. If he keeps, putting up these numbers that he's doing this season for the next 3-4 years, win some playoff series. That's just my take on it.
For me, I have a hard time. So when we're talking about talent alone, I don't love using winning as the forefront of that argument. I understand why it's necessary because we're splitting hairs and we're talking about greatness. So these are the kind of discussions that are needed. But for me, when it's just about talent alone, that's where I think it's acceptable to maybe look a little early to say, okay, this game or his production, it shows why he is who he is. And again, Cade is a guy that's a 3-level scorer, one of the best passers in basketball. He exceeds as a rebounder. He's a 6'7" point guard, and he gives you versatility that you want in a modern day NBA team. Like, I think that is just rare, and I think that speaks to talent. Winning, I think, can come in so many different ways from so many different other players in ways that it doesn't necessarily, to me, it is just how I see it. It doesn't necessarily put talent in its proper perspective to me when I'm looking at it, because there are nights where, there was like Chauncey. I remember the MVP discussions he had because he did an extremely good job of taking care of the basketball. I remember his assist to turnover ratio was just ridiculously out of the world for what he was doing. And I loved watching him play when he was leading that team. But in terms of just talent alone, like Cade, again, as a number 1 overall pick, he was the first of that class for a reason. He's being compared in other, like all these kind of names for a reason. The numbers he's putting up and like the reliability that he has on this team is because of his talent. I see the comments. I understand y'all pushing the chip argument, and I understand that. If you want to use it, use it. I'm not even going to argue with you. Like, again, I just don't like, it's not even close because he got it. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, he's a dog. He's in his 4th year putting up unbelievable numbers that a lot of people didn't even expect. So to see his production be at this point of his career, we talked about, how productive and how great Grant was early in his career as well. That can't be slept on. I will never downplay Grant Hill and his greatness. He is fantastic. He may even have an argument as number 1. I get Isiah, but he has an argument in my mind. But I don't think it's – and I actually kind of like that you put Ben in the discussion too, because I also look at Ben – I call him the greatest defender of all time. I truly believe that. I've never seen a guy – control the paint the way he did, winning defensive player of the year 4 different times. And you just saw the difference it made when he wasn't on that team, when he moved over to Chicago away from the Pistons. So I'm okay with Ben being in that discussion. I saw someone mention Jerry Stackhouse. Like, there's a lot of players that shared a lot of extreme level talent for this Pistons team, and Cade Cunningham already belongs in those discussions. I don't think it's crazy. Whatever way you decide and where you decide what is who, I'm okay with it. I just don't think it's crazy or extreme to pick one side or the other. Like, I just think that's too much. It's not crazy.
Yeah, it's like I mentioned, I think it really depends where you want to pick your argument, like what point you're trying to make. And the way I look at it is, I think winning matters.
Of course.
I could see why people use the ring argument. No shot at Cade, but I mean, he hasn't had the best teammates around him. He's had rosters that don't make sense. I think eventually Cade will be in these conversations. Like, we could probably have this conversation again in a couple of years, and my opinion could completely change. If Cade wins a playoff series, I think that would hold so much weight in the Detroit Pistons community, the way we talk about Cade Cunningham as being a Pistons great. I really do. Because at the end of the day, all fans care about is winning. They don't care about potential. They don't care about, all-star games. They want to see their team win. And right now, Cade has not done a whole lot of winning in his 4 years with the Detroit Pistons. Not really his fault. That was kind of like a previous regime and their obsession with reclamation projects, centers, and, whiffing on bad draft picks at the end of the day. It's not really Cade's fault. But I think once he starts winning more basketball games, then these conversations and these debates we have, they're going to get way more entertaining, I think.
But that's why I'm happy Spencer used the word he used, because he didn't just say on a blank slate, Cade is better than Isiah or he's better than Grant. He said he's more talented. So when people say, like, who's better, you're taking talent and resume. And that's fair. I understand that. Spencer used the specific word of talent, and that is where I don't think resume has to be the number one view of a debate or an argument like this, because you're right. His roster could change, and a lot of arguments that people use are the times that they play in. The 04 days versus what they play in right now are, night and day. Even though I think, honestly, either player could have, I don't think it would have been a much difference if Cade was on the 04 Pistons. I also think Chauncey can succeed in today's NBA right now as well. I absolutely believe that. But again, in terms of talent alone, I don't think it's crazy to put Cade up in that discussion in the argument, because, again, Chauncey's production and his greatness, it wasn't over a 15-year span with the Pistons. He wasn't always a Hall of Fame level talent. Like, when he was with the Celtics and when he was with the Nuggets, and he was pretty good with Minnesota, but before he got to the Pistons, he was still trying to find his way. He was still trying to find that right fitting piece of a franchise to be on, and he found it with the Pistons. Cade doesn't really have much of that choice right now because obviously where he was drafted to. But again, in terms of just sheer talent, I think the numbers and the production speak for themselves. The fact that Cade is able to put up the numbers that he's putting up right now, that speaks to his talent, not his career resume. If we're stacking career resume, it's not close. It's not close. Like, Chauncey's a finals MVP. That's going to give him leverage no matter what. And I'm okay with that. But in sheer talent alone, I think Cade has a stronger argument than people are giving him credit for.
Yeah, I do too. We have a friend of the show, friend of that we share, Sean Murphy, actually watching us live right now. Shout out
What
to
up,
Sean.
Sean?
And he has a really great comment, and I agree with him. He's like, my thing is, can we let Cade finish his third full season playing first before we start having the Isiah Thomas conversation? It just dismisses the significant history of this franchise too quickly. And I tend to agree with Sean. I think when we get into these conversations and GOAT debates, it's kind of first take-ish.
Yeah,
in a sense, but I do agree with him. I think Cade has all the makings to be an all-time great. I think he has the possibility to, be a first-team All-NBA. I think he has the possibility and the potential to be in MVP conversations. I mean, you see the role players right now. Like, I love Malik Beasley. He's an elite role player. Tim Hardaway Jr. Tobias Harris really hasn't done too much this season, but you get what I'm saying. Like,
right.
You put just competent role players around him, he's having a great season. Put a star next to him. Who really knows? I like Cade, Isiah Thomas, Pistons GOAT, the Pistons GOAT. Grant Hill was my favorite growing up. Grant Hill's the reason why I'm a Detroit Piston fan still to this day. But I'm with Sean. We just gotta pump the brakes a little bit in terms of who's better, because I think you can get into really toxic conversations and people get in their feelings sometimes when you get into these arguments.
For sure. It's, I definitely don't want to be a Stephen A type of discussion, but these are the fun conversations too, I believe, sometimes, because it shows that you got something right. Like, we're not sitting here wondering, we're not having a Killian Hayes type discussion with Cade Cunningham. He's the guy. You won on a pick. You didn't screw up like Stanley Johnson. You didn't screw up on Luke Kennard. This is a pick that's working out and a guy that you can build around. So, yeah, it could definitely be premature, but I don't think it's a disrespect or a disservice to the guys who played before him. I don't think it's a disrespect to the other guys, because, again, people go, it's not close. How could you? It's because he's putting up great numbers. The team is winning. He's a number 1 overall pick. Like, all of that matters in terms of talent. Where his resume goes from here, that's to be seen. We'll see what, happens from here on out. But in terms of his talent, I think he's checked all the boxes you could ask for. Like, there's some weaknesses to his game, but he's shown areas in games, in stretches, that he can still do that. His shooting is getting better. His defense, he's shown that he can be a reliable on-ball defender. Again, one of the best passers in basketball, great rebounder. It's not a lot of holes right now in Cade's game where it's holding the team back. So, Again, I understand it's premature a little bit, but it also could be viewed as fun if you look at it in its proper perspective.